A few years ago, I was never able to finish any of my exam papers, except for English. For every subject, math, A math, physics, history, chemistry, geography, Chinese, whatever, for every single paper, I was rarely able to complete it on time during the exam. There was this one time, actually several times during class, where the teacher gave us a practice paper to do during class, right? And I would always see the guy beside me just scribbling away, which made me paranoid as fuck. And then like 10 minutes later, he would be on the fifth page while I was still on like the second page of the paper. And this was a massive constraint that I had, which stopped me from getting straight A's. Because I would always end up submitting papers with 5, 10, even 20 marks worth of questions that I left completely blank. And it would feel very unfair because I worked hard. Like, I studied the content, I practiced the past year papers, but I'm still not getting straight A's because of this. Then, towards the end of 2023, right before my GCE O-levels exams, I adopted a different attitude towards papers. And I changed the way I look at my exams. I changed the things I did in the exam hall itself. And I still wasn't able to finish most of my papers, but I managed to get a raw L1 R5 of 7 in my GCE O-levels exams, which basically means I got straight A's. I did it. By the way, my name is Isaac, and I help students like you get straight A's without sacrificing their free time and happiness. If you watched me before and you found my videos very valuable, go click the second link in the description below and click the yellow join button. That's my free community where I can directly help you improve your grades. I'm telling you this story because us students, we've been taught to study. There's a lot of YouTubers online who teach you, oh, you have to study this way, this study tactic or that study tactic. But the skill of actually taking the exam itself is not often talked about, right? Yes, like exam taking is a skill. The things you do in the exam hall itself during those 1 to 2 hours is a skill that you can develop to significantly boost your grades. But since no one teaches that, students who are working hard, putting in the time, effort, discipline, blood, sweat, tears, can very easily fuck up whilst taking the exam itself, and then end up not getting the grades that they want, which is completely unfair. And if you've watched this far, you can probably relate to this, right? You're kind of like me, unable to finish any papers on time, right? Well, in this video, my promise to you is that I will teach you this skill of exam taking. If you're one of those guys who can't seem to finish your papers, this video is for you. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what to do to skyrocket your grades and get straight A's, even if you can't finish your papers. So, the things I did differently were, number 1, I became trigger happy with skipping questions, and number 2, I allocated my time such that I got the biggest bang for my buck. I'll tell you what those two things mean. So, part 1, becoming trigger happy with skipping questions. Let me tell you a story. It was around mid-2023. And I was taking my physics paper too. At first, I breezed through half the questions cause they were, not to sound arrogant, but they were easy as fuck. Then I made it to the middle of the paper, and there was this one very challenging data-based question. One of those questions you get in science subjects where they basically give you like a whole ass comprehension passage for you to answer the questions. I used all of my concentration. I stared at the question for like 3 minutes. I wrote my answer and then changed my answer. Then I realized I made a careless mistake there, and then I changed my answers again. I had a gut feeling that I should just skip to the next question because I was spending way too much time on this one question. But my ego didn't let me just skip the question. I thought I was very good at physics and I was like sucked into that one question. And after a while, I managed to complete it. Wow, massive W, right? I was so proud of myself. Then, I looked at the clock and I realized that I had like 15 minutes left for the rest of the paper. Fuck. I ended up submitting the paper with 20 20 marks worth of questions left completely blank. But here's the important thing. When we received the results for our physics paper 2, my classmates whom I knew were, no offense, not as good in physics as I was, they actually scored better for their paper 2 than I did. And so I was confused, and I asked one of them, how were you able to do that one difficult question? And he said, oh, I didn't even bother doing that question, I just skipped it. Apparently, all of the questions before and after that one difficult question were easy as fuck. Or at least relatively easy. And the guys who were not as good in physics as me, who had a smaller ego than me, took one look at that hard question and was like, nah, fuck this shit. And then they went ahead and did all of the easy questions, which I wasn't able to do because I spent all my fucking time on that one hard question. Because I had a bigger ego. So ironically, these guys who were supposedly not as good as me in physics scored higher than me in their paper 2. And I experienced similar things in math, chemistry, and basically every other subject. So I started implementing 2 rules for my exam taking. Rule number 1, when I finish reading a question, and I can't write anything for like 5 to 10 seconds after reading the question, I'll immediately skip to the next question. Of course, you do not count to 5 or 10 seconds like in your own head. Do not count like 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. That's just distracting. Instead, you should kind of estimate it and use your own tuition. Like, you know when you do a paper and there are some questions where you read the first line, you immediately can start writing. And you basically already know what to do. And then there are some questions where you can't immediately start writing, but you kind of know which direction to go in. You need like a few seconds to think and reread the question before you write something. And then there are questions where you're like, what the fuck? And you can stare at it for like 2 minutes and still not be able to write anything. That type of question is the one that you should skip immediately. Rule number 2, when you have something to write, write it. When you start having things to write, skip to the next question. This goes especially for humanities subjects, because in general, the mark allocation for humanities per question is diminishing for how much you write, which in layman terms that basically means as you write more for one question, you get less and less marks for each line or paragraph that you write. So the way I do humanities papers is very, very like spontaneous. I'll look at the question, okay, here's some things I can write, I'll write it. Oh, I've run out of things to write, but I haven't completed the question. Don't care, doesn't matter. If I can stare at the question for 5 seconds and not come up with anything new, I'm skipping immediately to the next question. Then I'll come back to this question later. So basically, start being extremely disrespectful to the order in which the questions are presented to you. Basically, the order is bullshit. Feel free to jump around the paper whenever you find yourself stuck. I know this sounds counterintuitive for focus, but it actually helps maintain your focus and your flow state, because when you encounter a difficult question and you stare at it for like 1, 2, 3, 5 minutes and you still can't write anything, and you force yourself to keep trying to think of something to write and follow the order of the questions, that's not focus work. That's not even unfocused work. That's just not work. You're not writing anything for those few minutes, which is just a massive waste of time. So your actionable step right now, set an alarm on your phone right before your next exam, or just write down some kind of reminder on your notes or on your textbook or phone wallpaper that says be trigger happy with skipping questions. So part 2. Allocate your time properly to get the biggest bang for your buck. The harsh truth is, certain questions or sections in the paper give you more marks for the same amount of time spent on them. An extreme example is the High Chinese paper 1, which has 2 sections. The first section takes up like a quarter of the score for the paper, while the second section takes up 3/4 of the score, which is 3 times more than the first section. And yet 90% of students write basically the same number of words for both sections. Normally, if you're a student who can finish the entire paper in the given time, you won't have to worry about this. But if you've watched this far, you're probably kind of like me. You're not able to finish your papers. So you have to start worrying about this. Okay, so this only applies for papers that you already kind of know the structure of. If you don't, either ask your teacher or go online and find the official syllabus PDF document published by your examining body or whatever. So do this very simple practice for every paper that you take that you know the structure of. Look at the structure of the paper, right? Look at the amount of marks allocated to each section in the paper. And then look at the total amount of time that you have for the paper. Grab a calculator, then allocate the time to each section proportionately to how many marks each section carries. So if there's a 1 hour paper with 2 sections, and section A carries 20 marks and section B carries 40 marks, then allocate 20 minutes to section A, 40 minutes to section B. And during the exam itself, if you find that you're spending more than the allocated time on a certain section, literally discipline, like force yourself to immediately skip to the next section. This will ensure that you do not spend too much time on the sections that are barely worth any marks and too little time on the sections that literally carry 50% or more of the marks. So your actionable step is to do this right now for your next paper. Go pause this video right now and just do it. By the way, you can also try experimenting with doing certain parts of a paper first. Like for example, doing section B before doing section A if section B seems to be more important. You can do this on your own with practice papers. Don't experiment during an actual exam. You can see if it works for you and then you can do it during the actual exam. Here's an extra tip. Don't be afraid to get your way when something goes wrong during or before an exam. If you're in an exam hall and you realize that's something that may hinder your performance during an exam, like for example, your table's a bit shaky, your chair's a bit shaky, there might be an error in the paper, something's wrong with the paper, the paper's missing something, it could be anything really. If there's anything like that, immediately raise your hand and tell a teacher. Cause you have to understand, right? This is an actual exam. If there's something that affects your performance and you don't report it, and you end up scoring worse than you could have because of that, then the responsibility is on you. You're the one taking the L. So don't be afraid to get your way when something goes wrong during or before an exam. By the way, if you want my one-to-one help with getting straight A's, click the top link in the description below to see if you would be a good fit for my one-to-one coaching package. I hope this video was valuable. Please give me any criticism or feedback in the comments below so that I can improve, and I wish you a good day.